Cheers, I do, buckaroos. How the heck are you today? I am the Whiskey Whisperer. I just picked this up at my local Macadoodles. I love store picks, no matter where I am. In my own town, or when I'm out of town. And anytime I see something, especially when I'm out of town shopping, not even looking for anything in particular, I like to find the barrel picks. So, for instance, when we were in Kansas City, the Lucas Liquor, they had a barrel pick of their J. Riggers cast strength bourbon. So I picked that up because it was I had had it before, but it is brilliant. Anyway, so I just found this one. It only runs about 30 a bottle. Ezra Brooks, handpicked from Extraordinary Barrels, Distillers Collection, bourbon whiskey, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, I should say. This is 107 proof. Hand selected for Macadoodles, Springfield. Barrel number 7167119. Barrel filled on 9/3 of 15. So it is a 4-year-old bourbon, distilled and aged in Kentucky for Lux Row Distillers, Bardstown, Kentucky. That uses the Ezra Brooks name, Lux Row Distillers. So let's put this down here. So what I did here is I typically do two pours, right? I do a neat and a rock. But this time I decided to go 3 directions. I have it neat in my Glencairn here. I have it on Whiskey Stones in my neat glass. And then here in my rocks glass, well, I have it on the rocks. So, without further ado, I'm going to check the nose on all 3, but then I'm going to get right to that rocks. So I don't want too much water to get in there. It is 107 proof. I actually took part of the Riegers tasting where they picked a barrel. I was glad to be a part of that. That was pretty awesome. It was 100 proof bourbon, or no, I'm sorry, Kansas City whiskey for the Riegers. And it runs 54 a bottle, so that kind of gives you an idea. This one at only 30, it's a little bit different. So I'm trying to be fair in my assessment, but I got to tell you, the nose neat is absolutely gorgeous. A lot of vanilla, a lot of spice. I'm going to get more intricate on it later. Like I said, I really want to get to the rocks. I'm sorry I keep grabbing my nose, but it's itching me today. Because we've got a nice day. It's almost spring-like out there today. And everything's making my nose itch. I was curious, but I've never compared. So I've compared neat to rocks, but I've never compared neat to Whiskey Stones because I'm not diluting the whiskey, but I am bringing that temperature down. So I was curious to how much that would change it. Off the top of my head, what I'm feeling initially is a whole lot more vanilla, a little bit colder. So let's get to the rocks because I don't want too much water to get in there. What I did pour in there though is about 1.25 ounces into each one. Because I'm drinking 3, I didn't want to do monster pours like I typically do sometimes, man. Anyways, I digress. That's pretty good. I don't know if you noticed, but I mean, I made no face. That's rather easy to drink. Typically, this is a 4-year-old. If we're talking about brands, as far as going further up the food chain and costing more money, in some cases, you get a. How do I say this right? Typically, though, for me anyway, what I feel is as you get further up the price point food chain is you tend to get a more nuanced whiskey. But this is a very easy whiskey to drink at 107 proof. I didn't figure it would mind a little bit of water at 107, to be honest. So the nose, a lot of vanilla, a lot of spice. I personally are getting a lot of cinnamon as per usual. But the nose is muted on the rocks, which isn't unusual either. Again, it's incredibly easy to drink. A lot of vanilla. You feel the barrel spice at the end in the form of cinnamon. And sometimes I detect other spices, but in this case, I'm really getting a lot of cinnamon. And of course, you get that oakiness. I kind of went without saying, but I should bring that up. You feel these nice toasted oak qualities. There's a hint of that char. There's a little bit of sweetness, almost brown sugar-like sweetness. I'm going to say light brown sugar because you get a hint of molasses, but not a lot. You may find some fruit notes in there. That's really up to you and your palate. But it wouldn't be unusual to find notes like a raisin, date, or fig in a whiskey like this. Oddly enough, I feel like I'm getting a hint of apple. That could just be me, though. Anyway, I want to get through this rock, so I really want to get to the others. Like I said, I don't want too much water to get in here. I'm not worried about drinking the others too slowly, but this one I don't want to drink too slowly. It is rather, some folks hate when you use this word, but screw them. It is rather smooth for a 107 proof whiskey. But I am curious what the difference is now. Now that I have both of them here, I want to check the nose on both the rocks and the neat. Not the rocks, but the whiskey stones. Because I'm not diluting the whiskey, but I am getting it colder. And I want to see if that changes anything. Well, right away, actually, to be honest with you, yeah, it feels a little warmer neat, which isn't wrong. But it also feels sweeter. I get a lot of sweetness, a lot of that brown sugar. That brown sugar over here that I said felt like a light brown sugar with just a hint of molasses. Here I'm feeling more of a darker brown. You're feeling more molasses notes. Although I am feeling some vanilla, a pretty good amount actually. Colder, I am feeling more vanilla. Oh, damn. Yeah, you can't tell. Okay, just from the stones to the rocks. Let's talk about that. What you lose when you put this on some ice, a little bit of water isn't going to hurt a whiskey at 107 proof, and it sometimes just depends on what you're looking for. But what I did lose, and I will admit that freely, is that I lost some texture. It has a very silky, smooth, velvety texture when I've got it here on the stones that you did lose on the rocks. I also lost some of the nuances of this whiskey now that I'm having it on the stones a little bit colder. Is again, I mentioned some cinnamon. I'm feeling only cinnamon as far as spice goes, but I'm feeling it in a much bigger way. It almost feels like a cinnamon sugar kind of feel. If you ever had a cinnamon toast as a youngster, that's kind of the feel I'm getting. Yeah, that's it. It's like a cinnamon toast. Yeah, it almost has that French toast kind of feel because you got that vanilla cinnamon sugar thing going on. It's nice. I'm gonna set that off to the side because I'm not worried about that one too much, but I want to compare it immediately to the neat here. It is a little warm, meaning you can feel some of that alcohol. I'm not going to go all the way to boozy on it because it doesn't feel harsh or off-putting. But yeah, you can feel a little bit. You're going to get a little burn, and it's 107 proof. Wow. So I mentioned cinnamon toast, and I feel those notes here as I'm drinking it neat, but a little warmer. It's even more intensified, if that makes sense to you. Good golly, that's good. Oddly enough, it is similar between neat and just having the stones on it, but there is a bit of a difference. The nose is slightly different, so are the tastes, and where it hits you on the palate is a little bit different as well. To be honest, I don't know that I'll drink this on the rocks much. Even though it is 107 proof, and I mentioned it could take some water, because I lost so much of that texture that I don't know if I want to risk that again. But again, to be honest, I will probably mix the applications to between neat and stones, because it is enjoyable and just slightly different. A little bit colder. It's not better or worse necessarily, but there are enough differences to make you want to try both applications. Will I cocktail this? That's a good question I like to ask myself. Yeah, I think because of this particular bourbon, I think it will be fine in an old fashioned or even a Manhattan, even though Manhattan traditionally uses rye. A lot of places are using bourbon, and I've always personally liked a Manhattan better with bourbon, especially a traditional bourbon that uses rye as a secondary grain. The reason for me is I feel like it gives the drink a little more dimension. But again, that's just my particular opinion on the matter. I don't mind rye. Recently, I had the New Holland beer barrel rye, which is made a beautiful Manhattan and an old fashioned, to be honest with you. But yeah, again, at 107 proof, I'm not worried too much if I do cocktail this, right? Especially making I would never highball a whiskey like this. The reason being, it's too good a quality. I mean, I'm not going to highball a whiskey. I'm not going to put Coke in a whiskey of this quality. No, that's a waste of time and money and energy, and it's just wrong, man. But yes, I would definitely use this in a classic cocktail like an old-fashioned or a Manhattan. And the reason I emphasize the word classic is most nouveau cocktails tend to add 112 ingredients, man. And you don't need a lot of liqueurs bouncing off this liquor. You're going to lose it. An old-fashioned or a Manhattan where you're adding a couple ingredients but you're still showcasing the whiskey, that'll work. So the oak, how prevalent is the oak? Actually, it's a little lighter than I expected, to be honest with you. You do feel these nice toasted oak notes, maybe a hint of char, almost like another brand of Tennessee whiskey. I'm not going to mention the brand, but I think by saying Tennessee, you know what I'm talking about. It almost has that same char-like feel. I mentioned some brown sugar earlier, and that taste right there, I really felt like I was, initially, yeah, I do feel the vanilla, honey, brown sugar, vanilla brown sugar, but right there at the end, I really felt some honey notes is how I meant to phrase that. Fruit notes, I mentioned you might get some fruit notes when I was drinking on the rocks. Fruit notes are more prevalent here. I mentioned apple over here. Here I'm not feeling apple, but I am feeling those other notes that we talked about. Well, I mentioned you might find some date, raisin, or fig. Here I am particularly getting date and fig. So I'm going to set that off to the side and focus all my attention on eating now. I do want to stress here that early on I said I was getting primarily cinnamon or only cinnamon, whereas some other bourbons I feel other spice notes. Yeah, I am going to say that. However, the longer I let this sit, the colder I let those stones get this whiskey. The cinnamon did intensify. I want to really bring that out, or bring that up, I guess. I've had 2 ounces of whiskey. Maybe I'm starting to... This is the first thing I've had to drink today, man. Anyways, believe it or not, I used to make this joke. I act like this all the time, so no one knows when I am drinking. The truth is, it's funny though. I don't know how many videos I've done where it was the first thing I've had to drink that day, and they mention how wasted I am. I think a lot of that is because I'm a very animated guy, so they see that when I use my hands so frequently, and the things I say, and the stuttering, for instance. I have Tourette's, and that does cause some of that stuttering, but I've always stuttered since I was a boy. So sometimes that again, right there, the stammer, is there all the time. And honestly, sometimes it goes away after I've been drinking. So if you hear that stammer a lot, chances are I'm not drinking a thing. But it does just I just shake my head. I can't tell you how many times somebody says, you were wasted, when it was actually the first thing I had to drink, and they will not believe me. But I think a lot of that is because, I was going to say this and I went on to something else, is that I think a lot of folks are used to seeing beer reviewers. Power off. Beer reviewers, my speaker just went off. Beer reviewers that have absolutely, and whiskey reviewers for that matter, that have absolutely no personality. You have a lot of these guys doing this deadpan all the way through, and that's not what I've said actually, which is why I've never called myself a reviewer. My videos I typically entitle At the Pub with the Beer Whisperer or Whiskey Whisperer, depending on what I'm drinking at the time, because I feel like we're having more of a conversation than me reviewing the whiskey or the beer, but I do want to give you the tasting notes. But believe it or not, this is the first thing I've had to drink today. However, right now I am about 2.5 ounces in as I head into my last one here, so there you go. Mercy, Percy. So texture, I mentioned the texture on the stones. I felt like I lost that when I had it on the rocks. Now here, neat, it is even more so. The texture is fine here, but I will admit it's even lost a little bit just getting a little bit colder. Here, I mean, at the temperature, it probably ought to be drank at, even at 107 proof. It is about damn near perfect. A lot of this great big dark brown sugar, heavy molasses notes right up front, but at the end you really feel those honey sweetness subtleties. This creamy, sweetened vanilla all the way through. And again, the French. I mentioned cinnamon toast, yeah, but here you really feel those French toast-like notes. If you were to take that French toast, use a lot of vanilla in your batter, which I do, and add cinnamon and brown sugar, which I do. So for me, it feels like these great big French toast notes that I felt with the Stones, but you even feel them bigger. Neat. So there you go. Absolutely freaking gorgeous. Yeah, for a $30 bourbon, I gotta tell you, it is worth every penny. Now, I've had people tell me, I like folks like get snobby from time to time, tell you, well, you can't find a good bourbon for under $40. I think those are the same people that won't pay less, a certain dollar amount for a bottle of wine. Bourbon is a different animal. You can't treat bourbon like it's Scotch, because Scotch, the longer it's aged, the smoother it gets. It's a simple equation, but bourbon is not the same animal. And longer age doesn't necessarily mean better. It depends on the quality of the mash that you start with in that particular mash bill. So there you go. I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, per wisdom man. All right, good guy. Cheers.